3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
All right, welcome to Roots of Reality. I'm your host, Ben Baumann, and today I'm going to be talking about the history of Americans supporting authoritarians. So, in America today, radical viewpoints tend to have an outsized influence in society. After all, the various media outlets typically want to highlight the craziest people on the opposing side of the political spectrum as part of their partisan agenda. This is obviously, this is how you score points politically. If you're trying to help Republicans, you want to make Democrats look as bad as possible. If you're trying to help Democrats, you want to make Republicans look as bad as possible, especially in an election year. In reality, though, despite the partisan agendas of various media companies in the United States, most Americans are not as polarized as it seems in the news. We have polling data on this all the time that shows that typically many Americans have a pretty down-to-earth perspective on a lot of different issues and agree on more things than they disagree on. However, this doesn't mean, though, that there isn't an alarming trend going on in the United States when it comes to politics and various viewpoints, especially, though, viewpoints that are sympathetic or even supportive of authoritarianism. And yet, the U.S., despite being the world's oldest democracy, has had people supporting authoritarians throughout its history for a variety of reasons. If you go back, for example, to the American Revolution in the late 1700s, there was the infamous historical figure named Benedict Arnold, who was not the easiest person to get along with and had served in the United States military as a general. Yet, due to a combination of his frustration with not getting promoted fast enough in the military ranks during the war, combined with the fact that he had various social connections to sympathizers of the British monarchy, he would eventually decide to betray the United States and join the British Army. Thus, he chose to support the King of England instead of American democracy. And fast forwarding later on, we have back in 1953, the former American president Dwight D. Eisenhower, who, due to geopolitical concerns regarding oil in Iran, he would help overthrow the democratically elected leader of Iran and replace him with the authoritarian Shah of Iran, thus highlighting an example of an American president openly supporting a monarchy due to economic interests instead of supporting a democracy. And this could be highlighted as an example of sort of shameful American imperialism that has happened throughout American history. And then fast forwarding even further to 1982, there was former President Ronald Reagan, who once openly praised the Guatemalan dictator Rios Montt, stating that he is a man of great integrity and that Montt wanted to truly improve the human rights in Guatemala. Unfortunately, though, Montt would actually end up committing various crimes against humanity in his country, even at one point going to trial for genocide, despite his conviction being overturned later. So he really wasn't a man of great personal integrity, and thus that is probably a moment Reagan would later regret. So these are three historical examples of important Americans supporting authoritarians for a variety of different reasons. Beyond this, though, there are also various political organizations throughout American history that have also supported authoritarianism. Some examples include the Communist Party of the United States of America, which was founded in 1919 and is still active today, which promoted a very positive view of the Soviet Union and mass murderer Joseph Stalin. And then also there was the German-American Bund, which was established in the U.S. in 1936 and promoted Nazi German propaganda. So this element of really radical political organizations is nothing new. So when we turn towards today, we can see that this long-standing history of kind of kooky ideas in American politics not only has continued, but you could argue is actually worse, because there are a number of people who support authoritarianism in the U.S. In fact, recent polling suggests 32% of Americans think it is a good form of government. And just to make matters worse, the head of the Republican Party today, former American President Donald Trump, is not only a fan of various authoritarians around the world, but he himself wishes to be an authoritarian and has already proven that he is not a fan of American democracy by trying to overthrow the American government and overturn the election results, and inspired January 6th, and now is talking about freeing what he considers to be political prisoners of January 6th. And beyond that, he's praised dictators like Russian dictator Vladimir Putin or Kim Jong-un in North Korea, or even Xi Jinping in China on numerous occasions. And even recently vowed to be an authoritarian-style ruler to a certain extent if he gets elected again, which who knows what that would open up for the future of American democracy. But it would not be good. On top of this, though, on the right wing of the political spectrum, there also have been people like Tucker Carlson, who routinely praises the authoritarian-style president of Hungary, Viktor Orban. And then there's also Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has given support to Russia in its invasion of Ukraine. Talk about how Russia's trying to, protect Christians while Ukraine isn't. Crazy stuff like that. And then when we shift to the left side of the political spectrum, we see this same issue of authoritarian support. There are various socialists, for example, in the United States who routinely support authoritarian governments. There is the super radical Party for Socialism and Liberation, which supports North Korea, Russia, Cuba, and China. Then there's the Democratic Socialists of America, who have supported Russia and Venezuela, and even given some sympathy towards the Palestinian terrorist organization Hamas. They didn't really condemn them and their attacks, and was talking about how resistance to Israel is justified, basically giving cover to Hamas and the terrorist attacks it has committed. And even some far-left Democrats have been a bit sympathetic to Hamas. One example is Democratic Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib from Michigan, who was the only representative to not vote to condemn Hamas's rape of various Israeli victims in their terrorist attack, which is pretty disturbing. And lastly, though not a socialist, there's Democratic presidential candidate Robert Kennedy Jr., who has given some support to Russia, claiming that Russia is acting in good faith in Ukraine and ultimately blaming the United States for the conflict. So these are all serious warnings, I would say, to the future of American democracy, because when these type of voices get amplified, the risk of authoritarianism in the U.S. can grow, especially if these people gain more power and influence. And that is why calling out support for authoritarians, regardless of what side of the political spectrum they fall on, is really important to continuing to protect American democracy going forward. Because as soon as this type of behavior gets normalized, then it becomes easier to implement an authoritarian government under the disguise of, well, it may be authoritarian towards the people I disagree with politically, but towards me, it's going to do what I want, so it's worth it. And it's that type of thing you want to avoid. And often this is the issue. When people have very, very strong political opinions, they want to kind of shove it down other people's throats and not have that ability to disagree and move on and compromise. And so here we are, the oldest democracy in the world. And we're at kind of this turning point as to where do we go from here. We have an authoritarian style president that wants to come back into power, that has already shown he does not care about democracy. And then we have another president that is quite old and not very relatable to a lot of Americans because of his age, who has been dealing with a pretty radical element of his own party that tends to be somewhat sympathetic towards authoritarians and fairly skeptical of America's role in the world. Regardless, though, if we can get through this next election by preventing further authoritarianism in government, then perhaps there's a future where we can be hopeful about kind of finding a better balance in society where we're able to have less radical voices dominating the conversation and rather empower more normal voices that truly represent the majority of the population of the country. So, as always, remember, billions of years led to you. So make the most of it.